I'm Charlie. This is my YouTube channel, and today I will be reviewing The Selection by Kiera Cass. So I listened to this book via audio a couple nights ago when I was having insomnia, so I just listened to it in one whole big chunk. I have mixed feelings about the romance genre. Overall, I feel like it's not necessarily a favorite. I'm more fantasy, classics, science nonfiction. I do really enjoy dabbling in the genre every now and then, and sometimes I even have fun with it, but a lot of the times it's kind of so-so. My thoughts overall about the selection is that while it wasn't very deep, it was tidy. It worked really well for what it was. I gave it a 3.5 stars on Storygraph. I'll put my Storygraph in the video description in case anyone does want to see what I'm putting on there. I don't really use Goodreads that much anymore. Another note about the selection is that I've literally been hearing about this book since I was in middle school. I am 23 now, so I've been hearing about this book for 10, 11 years. I would see it on the classroom bookshelves that some of my English teachers had as a middle schooler. I can't remember if I tried to read it at some point, but it wasn't anything that ever really piqued my interest. But the thing is now, like as an adult, I have found that I actually really enjoy premises of books that are like, here's a competition. So I loved A Gathering of Shadows, which is the second A Darker Shade of Magic book. And so when I was looking at some potential romance options and came across the selection, I was like, actually, a competition sounds fun. It's kind of like higher stakes The Bachelor. Another key component of this book is that it is a love triangle. I have mixed feelings about love triangles. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, but they are really hard to pull off. So that honestly did make me a bit nervous going into it. And I can't say that I liked it. I basically thought it was a slam dunk for one of the characters, and apparently it was not, and apparently our protagonist was not on the same page as me. But one of our love interests I was a fan of from the start, which I'll go more in details about in the spoiler section. But the other love interest, I didn't like him from the start. He was like okay from the start. He's just boring. So if one of your love interests is very milquetoast and the other is like, yeah, this is great. Wife him up, America. Like, that just doesn't work. It doesn't work. At least for me. Maybe for some readers, they were a little bit more like, ooh, who will she choose? But for me, it's obvious. At first, I thought that I didn't want to read the next book, largely because of how the love triangle situation is working. But I'm tempted. It's a series. I want to know what happened. Like one of my first impressions when I finished it was basically, I'm okay. I don't need to read the rest of it because I was cross about how it ended. But yeah, I might read the next one in the series. I'm curious. Anyways, I think that this book might be for you if you are looking for something sort of just fun to read or listen to. I did actually really like it as an audiobook. Like I said, I listened to it while I was having really bad insomnia a couple nights ago. And so it was honestly great company for that. It was a really lovely book to just like listen to while I was having a bit of a rough time. Also, this is a YA romance, and I feel like I might have had at least somewhat similar issues if I was a younger reader. YA is young adult, and I'm technically a young adult, but I feel like YA is more targeted at like teenagers. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it does feel like it's more teen focused than adult. Anyways, I might actually recommend this to some teenagers, but I feel like there's just so many better books out there that I'd be more likely to recommend. Like I mentioned, A Gathering of Shadows, if someone um, is looking for sort of competition type setup, I might recommend like, oh hey, you might like A Darker Shade of Magic, and then once you've gone through that, if you like it, the second book is a competition book, if you're willing to wait. Now we are getting into the spoiler section because I have many thoughts. Like I said, I've been taking notes while reading. They're a little bit chaotic, but I am going to go through them. So one of the things that I thought was super interesting, and I actually made a short video about, is that in this particular book, it seems like it wants to handle religion a little bit, but it doesn't quite understand how to do that and also makes errors when it is discussing certain things. So one of the quotes pretty early on is, "It's not as if you could change the birth date of a deity." And that is specifically referring to Christmas and the birth of Jesus. So when I heard this, I was like, ooh, that's fun. We're doing sacrilege. Things have changed a lot in this dystopian world. I will note, I'm an atheist, so I don't really care about sacrilege. But I do think it's interesting that they referred to Jesus as a deity because that is false idol worship. But then the book continued, and it seems like it was just an error because at one point the king blesses their meal before they eat, and there's also almost no other references to religion other than those two moments. So I genuinely think that the author just did a little sacrilege on accident. And because the whole book is like not all that in depth, um, it's just not really deep with anything or making all that much social commentary, and the world isn't particularly detailed. Uh, yeah, I just think that one was a goof. I wish it hadn't been. It would have been so interesting if they considered Jesus a deity at that point. I know there's like the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, but that's not the only deity is God in like the Christian faith. I'm also assuming that they're basing this on Protestant branches of Christianity rather than Catholic branches of Christianity, because this seems to be set in like America in the future and maybe like certain parts of Canada also included or something. But it's mostly in America, and that is a Protestant country. Yes, there are also a lot of Catholics, but the country is primarily Protestant. Famously, America started in part because Puritans were not happy with the situation in the Catholic Church in England. I also have another complaint. This is how it wasn't so much of a complaint, so much as just like, oh, this is interesting, but I wish the author had handled it differently. This is a complaint now. So, one of the only traits we get about our protagonist, America, is that she's pretty. She's so pretty. Oh my god, guys, she's so pretty. Um, can we get any other information? I got kind of sick of hearing it. And like it can be okay to have a protagonist that's very attractive because sometimes that is plot relevant. If your protagonist is very attractive and it's impacting how they're interacting with the world, especially in something that is a contest for someone's hand in marriage. Like, it makes sense that you are going to talk about, like, hey, this is why this protagonist is attractive. But everyone constantly being like, she's so pretty. It's annoying. I'm done with it. Any other information about her? We don't even get to learn like all that much about her music stuff. She plays the violin the once for the royal family, and we get to hear a little bit more about her music before she's in the competition, which was interesting hearing about her like work-life balance and all that jazz. But we get very little with her musical information after that. I'm also going to be a hater for a minute when I say at one point, America in her narration says something like, there were so many pretty songs in French. And this is after she talks about learning Spanish and French. And it kind of rubbed me the wrong way a little bit that she doesn't talk about Spanish. She's just like, oh, I know these languages and only this one is pretty. I feel like there's some bias happening there, especially since you're discussing both languages. Like, it makes sense if she's like, oh, I'm learning these languages for practical purposes because they are spoken in my country. But then afterwards, she only talks about how one of them is pretty, and it just kind of rubs me the wrong way. And I feel like I hear that about Spanish more often than I would like, especially with Mexican Spanish, which is probably what that country is still speaking because of proximity to Mexico. But I I'm not a fan of that. I would also like to say I'm pretty sure America's 16, and that's crazy. Why is no one talking about like, hey, it's weird that you're 16 and you're going to be someone's bride. You're in a essentially like a weird beauty pageant slash bachelor situation. That's crazy. She's 16. I'm gonna pause being a hater for a minute to talk about our romantic interests. Well, one of them I'm gonna be a hater about. It's true. I dare say I only liked one of them. But I'm gonna have fun for a minute and talk about Maxine because somewhat embarrassingly, I know we're like supposed to be like, oh my god, because it's a romance book. But I was a little bit embarrassed, especially with how like immediately I was like, I am on board because we first see him in that one broadcast. And with that broadcast, America literally calls him wimpy. And I was like, he just seems professional, but like kind of nervous. So I was on board about Maxon from the start, aside from like the weird dystopian government situation. That part, red flag. But like him as a person outside of that, and especially in the context of like, I knew he would be our um like main love interest, one of our main love interests. So I figured they'd probably tackle the weird dystopian government situation at some point. I was on board with him from the start. I'm a fan of professionalism. So he was in the broadcast, and I was just like, yeah, he's acting appropriate for his job position. That's great. That's a good sign. It's kind of cute that he seems a little bit nervous. That's charming. So he's got that professionalism, he's got that charm. That's nice. I do also really, really, really like it's not exactly an initial premise, but it's still early in the story where America and Maxon are like, okay, we're gonna team up, we're gonna be buddies, we're gonna help Maxon like find a wife, and they're gonna be friends in the process and just like have company as these two people who've been really, really lonely. That was adorable. I almost wish they could have stayed friends, but I don't know. It was really, really cute. I almost wish it was like, here we have America and she's one of our contestants. Like, this is my ideal situation. We have two perspectives, we have two different candidates. One of them's like America, one of them's one of the other characters in the story who's in this competition. And one of them is doing the romancing, that being America. And then the other one is just genuinely buddies with Max. And I also know that like defeats the purpose of the story because the purpose is supposed to be like, oh, we're friends, and then they weren't. But still, I like good friendship in stories. So I was kind of missing out on that, but I was also really excited when they were like, yes, let's just be friends. And I was like, that's not going to stay the case. One of my notes in here just says, he's so cute in all capital letters. So if that helps you know like how on board about Maxon I am, I I like him. He's sweet. He's really sweet. Although I must say, I am a little bit worried that his dad is gonna try to kill him after he started the like food pantry slash soup kitchen and like EBT slash food stamps type situation. I am a little bit worried about that. It's also strange that like he's this weird mix of sheltered and also knowing about a lot that's happening in the world. Seems like most of his education has been very like military focused and focusing on the rebels, but it's also like, how do you not know that your people are starving when there's rebels that presumably are rebelling largely in part due to food shortage? But yeah, I do hope that this series will continue with actually delving into essentially the propaganda happening in this world, because there's so much propaganda happening. America is very prone to falling for it. Clearly Maxon is, but I really, really hope that future books in this series actually deal with that a little bit more and work on the characters unlearning this propaganda. Now we have to talk about Aspen, and I don't want to talk about Aspen because I don't like he's just he's boring. And he's like sometimes sweet. Sometimes he's kind of a misogynist. Not like oodles, but like a little bit. Enough to be like, that's a red flag. You should break up. Oh, I just wish they'd stayed broken up. I don't want them to get back together. I didn't like the ending. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm getting ahead of myself. My thoughts on Aspen boil down to he is milquetoast at best and irritating at worst. He's just the only thing interesting that he really did was showing up as a guard, and that wasn't even like his choice. That just happened because of how their military worked. That was such a good twist. I like sat up in bed because I was so like, oh my god, he's the guard there. And then he's gonna guard her. That's crazy. I did really like that. But unfortunately, it's Aspen doing this. So he's boring. I just I don't know. Yes, the whole discussion of like how you're going to provide for your family is interesting, but he just didn't really give me anything to work with. That was kind of his only personality trait. I don't know. He just reminds me of like many people I've known who love their mediocre little boyfriend. And I'm like, I just don't care. You could do so much better. I don't know. And he's one of the things, like I said, I mentioned a little bit of misogyny. He was having some weird stuff early on, even though he did apologize for it, but I feel like, I don't know, it didn't quite work for me still. He had some weird stuff early on with like, oh, I'm the man, so I should be providing for you. It's like, well, you didn't apologize for the misogyny part. I don't know. He's boring. I like Maxon a lot better. So for me, the whole time, Maxon was like a slam dunk. And then towards the end, they set up more of this love triangle. And so it felt like backwards progress for our protagonist. And I know that like there was confusion about especially like the cheating stuff with um with Aspen. And so that did change the equation. However, Maxon has been like super, super charming the whole time for me. I thought the story would focus a little bit more on how she's getting over Aspen. Like, and I also really liked that kind of approach to it. I did think it was an interesting part of the nuance of America and Maxon's relationship that she was trying to get over someone who she'd been so close to and literally just got out of a relationship with. But then they ended up setting up the love triangle instead, and I did not like that. Another thing I want to be pedantic about that I also talked about in the short that I made about this book is America repeatedly calls Maxon Your Majesty, which technically she should actually be calling him Your Highness because he is a prince and not a king. And there was kind of some irony with the fact that when she first starts talking to him, she's like, "Oh my god, I'm referring to you wrong. I should be calling you Your Majesty." When she shouldn't. She should be calling him Your Highness. So she freaks out about like referring to him wrong, and then she keeps referring to him wrong. And it's just another point where the author, I feel, is like just didn't really research her stuff because there was the whole matter with religion and being like that's technically sacrilege, but okay, sure. And then there's this matter with titles, which is like a really basic thing to mess up, especially because that is how your character is referred to. Another very weird bit that was, I don't know if this was internalized misogyny or what, and it feels like it's kind of part of the issue that a lot of these types of books have with like, I'm not like other girls, I'm better, like that type of situation, is that there were multiple points throughout the book where the author essentially seemed to depict anyone who has big breasts is a bad person or like is a worse person because they're more sexual or something and they're gonna be weird about men. I don't know. It was weird. I didn't like that part. Anyways, overall, I did actually think the selection was a solid enough book. Like I said, the editing was crisp, the writing style worked well for what it was, but it wasn't very deep, and that was okay for what I wanted it to be. But overall, it wasn't stellar. That's why it's only a 3.5 for me because like it did the job I wanted it to do and it did that job well. However, it's also nothing really to write home about. So the review I gave it was, I'd say overall more positive than not, but there were a lot of flaws with the book, especially if I didn't want just something for fun. I hope you enjoyed this review. I'd actually like to review some more romance books in the future. I'm trying to do a romance reading type thing this summer. And so at some point in the future, you might have a video where I'm talking about a lot of different romance books at once. Let me know if there are any other romance books, especially with the like dark fantasy type stuff that you think I might enjoy reading, and I hope you have a wonderful day.